All right, today we're diving into one of the most, well, audacious stories in modern tech. It's about how this brand new company from China, YMTC, just appeared and took on the absolute titans of the semiconductor industry. And I mean, they genuinely struck fear into a cartel that's been running the show for decades. So let's get right into it.
Okay, so picture this, a poker game, right? But the buy-in isn't a few $100. It's a staggering $24 billion. And for decades, it's been the same three players at the table, just raking in the chips, controlling the whole game. This isn't some backroom in Vegas. This is the absolutely brutal, globally essential market for memory chips.
And who are these players? Well, it's a very tight-knit club. You've got Samsung and SK Hynix from South Korea and Micron from the US. For years, these three have basically been a cartel, an oligopoly. They built this technological moat around their business that was so deep and so expensive, it just seemed impossible for anyone, and I mean anyone, to get across.
So, the billion-dollar question, or maybe the $24 billion question is, how did a total newcomer, a state-backed company from China called YMTC, just pop up out of nowhere in 2016 and build a chip that didn't just rival the big guys, but in some ways was actually better? Yeah, that's the wild story we're cracking open today.
Okay, so to really get how YMTC pulled this off, we first need to understand the world they were jumping into. Because, the memory chip industry, it's literally the bedrock of our entire digital lives.
It really boils down to two main types of memory. First, there's DRAM. Think of this as the super fast workbench for your computer or phone. It's for active thinking, what's happening right now. But turn the power off and poof, it's all gone. Then you have NAND. NAND is the big warehouse. This is where you store everything long-term, your photos, your apps, your operating system. And YMTC, they set their sights squarely on that warehouse.
Now, for decades, the name of the game was simple. Just shrink everything, make it smaller. But with the old 2D NAND, where all the memory cells were laid out flat like a single-story building, the industry slammed into a hard physical wall. I mean, the cells got so crowded, so packed together, that electrons started leaking between them, corrupting the data. You just physically could not shrink them anymore. The game had to change, big time.
And the solution was, well, revolutionary. The entire industry had this light bulb moment. If you can't build out anymore, you've got to start building up. And just like that, 3D NAND was born. We're talking a fundamental shift from sprawling single-story factories to massive, towering data skyscrapers.
This completely new way of doing things kicked off this frantic race. Suddenly, it was all about who could stack the most layers. All that decades-old expertise in 2D manufacturing, it became way less important. This was a technological reset. It created this tiny crack in that fortress we talked about, a narrow but crucial opening for someone new. Someone well-funded and really ambitious to just storm the castle.
And this is where YMTC comes in. Their entire strategy, from day one, was engineered to exploit this very moment. They didn't just decide to join the race. They showed up with this completely radical new design, a secret weapon called X-tacking.
Okay, so here's the genius of it. Instead of building the memory stack and all the controlling electronics, the logic, on one single piece of silicon like everybody else, YMTC built them on two separate wafers at the same time. So it's like building a skyscraper steel frame on one side of town and all its complex wiring and plumbing on the other. Then you bring them together, flip one over, and fuse them into a single perfect tower with microscopic precision. It's just a wild idea. And the advantages were immediate, and honestly, they were profound. Because they could build that logic part on its own special optimized wafer, YMTC got a 50% boost in speed. They hit industry-leading density, packing more data into a smaller space. But maybe the biggest deal of all, they could develop and manufacture their chips way faster than the competition.
Think about that, a 20% reduction in manufacturing time. That is a massive advantage in a market that moves at lightning speed. It meant YMTC could just iterate faster, innovate faster, and run circles around the incumbents who were kind of stuck with their older, slower, all-in-one designs.
But look, having a brilliant chip is one thing. That's only half the battle. What YMTC did next was use this incredible technology to wage an all-out war on the market itself.
And the speed of their progress was just mind-blowing. In 2018, they were just announcing their new tech. Just 4 years later, by 2022, they sent an absolute shockwave through the industry by unveiling a 232-layer chip.
That put them right at the cutting edge, shoulder to shoulder with companies that have been doing this for 30 years.
And this is why the big guys, Samsung, Micron, were so scared. YMTC wasn't just another competitor trying to copy their playbook. No, they were playing a completely different game. It was an asymmetric strategy. They used a clever new design to leapfrog the slow, traditional path of progress that everyone else was stuck on.
And because they were backed by huge amounts of state money, YMTC started aggressively slashing prices. I mean, analysts literally coined a term for it, the NAND apocalypse. The big fear was that YMTC, which didn't have to worry about turning a profit, could just crash global prices and bleed its commercial competitors completely dry. This wasn't just business, it was using technology as a geopolitical weapon.
Well, you can't make that kind of noise on the world stage and expect no one to notice. This meteoric rise, this aggressive price war, it all got Washington's attention, and fast. The tech race turned into a national security issue, and the geopolitical hammer was about to come down hard.
So, in late 2022, it happened. The US government slapped YMTC on its entity list, which is a fancy way of saying it cut them off from buying key American equipment and software. The biggest public blow, though, was when Apple, under a ton of political pressure, had to drop YMTC as a potential supplier for the iPhone. The message from DC was crystal clear. We see you as a national security risk.
But if you thought that was the end of YMTC, you'd be wrong. The company didn't collapse. In fact, the Chinese state immediately responded by injecting another $7 billion into the company. It was a clear signal. We are not backing down. The new goal? Go all in on building a completely Chinese supply chain. And this brings us right to the heart of the matter, the central question about YMTC's future. Can this all-in gamble on self-reliance, can it actually work in the long run? Well, as you can probably guess, the answer is complicated.
To really get the nuances here, it helps to look at China's other big memory company, a DRAM maker called CXMT. See, YMT's clever X-stacking design allowed it to get around the need for certain sanctioned tools. But DRAM manufacturing is totally dependent on one specific super advanced tool called EUV, which is completely blocked by sanctions. And the result is stark. YMT made it to the cutting edge, while CXMT is stuck about 2 generations behind. It shows you just how surgically effective these sanctions can be.
So for YMTC, this whole situation, this forced pivot to a China-only supply chain, it's a true double-edged sword. On one hand, they've shown this incredible resilience, but that resilience definitely comes at a cost.
Okay, so YMTC has now become the #1 customer for China's own homegrown chip-making equipment industry, which is exactly what Beijing wants. It's fast-tracking their goal of self-sufficiency. However, there are reports that one of their newer chips actually had to be designed with 70 fewer layers than an older one, and that suggests a pretty major compromise was made, probably to get things to work with the less precise Chinese tools they now have to use.
And that brings us to the final crucial question. This whole fight, it's not just about market share anymore. It's a fundamental race in manufacturing technology. Can China's homegrown supply chain get good enough, fast enough, to keep YMTC at the very top of the game? The answer to that will tell us everything. Whether YMTC is a truly sustainable threat that's going to reshape the entire industry, or if it's just a very, very expensive, state-funded anomaly that will eventually fade away.